Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. I promise you loads more of Pochettino content, and I am here with James from the Planet FPL pod, who's a Spurs fan. So he's going to give us all of the insight of Pochettino's time at Spurs. I'm super excited for this. James, thank you so much for joining me. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So let's jump right into it. The first question I wanted to ask you was just about how Pochettino is as a manager, because I've been doing a lot of research and found some interesting things about like how he believes in auras and that he can read people. So from a manager perspective, what do you think that he's going to bring to Chelsea?
Yeah, I think certainly when he came in at Tottenham, he set guidelines and principles in terms of behaviour. I think was very important because I think the players at Tottenham hadn't had behavioural structure for a long time. They were allowed to kind of do their own thing. I mean, with your team this year, it feels like a lot of the players have checked out. So they need a lot of discipline being brought back in. And I know he likes to do things like watch them eat and not necessarily right in front of them, but he likes to be in a place where he can view everybody eating, and it's a principle everybody has to shake hands before training, after training. There's certain guidelines in terms of respect. He's very important to him.
And one of the things that I thought was interesting was that apparently the training sessions are quite difficult. So is that something that you noticed? Because it's something that from the outside, maybe I saw from Pochettino's time at Spurs, that it felt like Spurs just had so much endurance and could run and run and run. And that's part of the training that he implemented. So do you notice anything regards to training or like how disciplined like he's going to make these players become? Because that has been a problem for Chelsea.
Yeah, and it was at Tottenham before he came in as well. And I think there were many players who couldn't handle it. But he'll work them very hard. Very hard. You've probably heard stories of various Terror Tuesdays and horror runs and long distance runs and certain drills where he'll work them hard. I remember listening to a story of Ricky Lambert actually at Southampton, where he responded to Pochettino a few weeks in and said, "Look, boss, you're working us too hard." And he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't know about that." And then he came in for training the next day. Ricky Lambert thought he had it sussed, and he just made them do double. So if anybody questions that authority, that's the sort of thing might happen. Now, the only thing that's worth saying is you can get away with that at Southampton a lot more than maybe you might at a club like the size of Chelsea, where you might get a little bit of resistance. But you'd like to think there'll be a certain buy-in. I think there'll be a certain period where he'll give all the players a chance. There'll obviously be a number of players that will leave the club this summer, but those who stay will get a shot at trying to get their place within the first team. And some will survive and some won't. It's as simple as that, basically.
But I really like hearing that. I think it's refreshing because at Chelsea, I feel like there's just been a lot of maybe player power, so to speak, and you see a lot of managers that have kind of lost the dressing room, and then we've lost the manager. And I really feel like we need somebody who's going to take the reins and direct this group of players. And it's something that Lampard spoke about, like basically every week, like we're not training as we should be. Like obviously morale was on the floor. But just like garnering this group of players and picking out the ones that are going to be in the squad, and then maybe being a bit ruthless if he needs to and saying, hey, okay, like this is the cut, you haven't made it, which I think is maybe one of like the main mistakes that Graham Potter made. Of course, there's a lot of things that happened with the size of the squad and how many players that we signed in January, and that like goes all throughout the board. But I think being super critical, and I don't want to say harsh, but like a bit ruthless.
Yeah, he will be.
You know, that's super good to hear. And I think
he'll also take his time with it. One of his famous sayings at Tottenham, which he openly said to people, was that you don't sign for Tottenham to play. You sign for Tottenham to train. And that will be the same. And so he won't cast players off after one or two training sessions, because he wants to push barriers and he wants to see a bit of resistance and then see who will come through on the journey with him.
That's so refreshing to hear, honestly, because I feel like that's exactly what this group of players needs. So, looking back at the time at Spurs, what was the typical formation that Poch implemented, and do you think that he's going to maybe implement a similar formation? I saw that perhaps it was a back four, and Chelsea have typically played in a back five, so that was something that I was maybe a bit curious about.
It's very much evolved. When he left Southampton to join us, we were told he only had one formation, which was 4-2-3-1, which he basically exclusively played for the first year or so. And then when Tottenham started to develop, and we obviously pushed Chelsea in the 16-17 season, we began to see a real evolution during that season where he played 4-1-4-1 in a fixture against Manchester City, which we won 2-0 and was regarded probably as the best performance by any team that season. And that was despite having no Harry Kane or Moussa Dembele, which were probably his two most important players in that particular fixture. Then there was the development of Kyle Walker and Danny Rose became real weapons in the fullback area. And he transitioned Derek Dyer from a holding midfield player to a right-sided centre-back, and then played 3-4-2-1 with Christian Eriksen and Dele Alli behind Harry Kane. We've seen diamonds later on when Tottenham lost a bit of control and became a bit more counter-attacking. We could see diamonds formations with perhaps Son playing right up front with Harry Kane. So we began to see a little bit of an evolution. It went from one rigid system to then going to games a couple of years in and actually not knowing necessarily what the system would be. But once he's got something that's on a good run, like you might remember the game when Dele Alli scored twice at Tottenham.
Always scored against us. I don't
I mean,
know.
to be fair, you'd won 14 games in a row before that and were on an incredible run. But at that point, Tottenham were playing some brilliant football with a back three, and he was very much sticking with that. Then Danny Rose got injured and it started to flip-flop between the two again. So the personnel was quite important, but I think he would be open and flexible to be able to play multiple different formations, which the majority of the good managers will do now.
Yeah. And you kind of spoke on this a little bit, but who are the main players that you feel develops the most under Potter? You saw the biggest transformation from them?
The biggest transformation was with the fullbacks. So Cole Walker went on to a different level and obviously has done the same at Manchester City now as well. But he was a very rapid fullback, but had kamikaze moments, and Pochettino managed to get that out of him. Danny Rose developed from a very willing defender who'd been transformed from a winger to a fullback who broke into the England team. Even Ben Davies improved massively, but offensively as much as defensively. And Kieran Trippier, it seems hard to believe now, but in the first year that he was at Tottenham, he just wasn't up to standard at all.
Wow.
And then got him to a position where he was able to take over from Kyle Walker and played every week in the team that got to a Champions League final. So fullbacks is the one, if you consider yourselves with, when fit, Ben Chilwell and Reece James, whether it's a back four or a back three, you'd certainly hope there'd be promise there. He managed to eventually find a position which Moussa Dembele made his own. He converted Eric Dyer both originally into a midfielder and then back into a defender. And obviously the development of Harry Kane. Pochettino had a huge role in that, and the nurturing of youngsters like Dele Alli, Harry Winks. So, I mean, there's multiple great facets in terms of the development. What many of them all have in common, bar a little bit with Dembele, young. That's really important to Pochettino. And you've obviously invested in a lot of young players.
Exactly. So that kind of leads me to my next question. It might be a little bit difficult because Chelsea's squad is so bloated at the moment, but Chelsea's current recruitment strategy has been, okay, let's focus on buying young, raw talent. Some might hit it off, some might not, but do you have any players that you see that might benefit in this Chelsea squad under Pochettino?
I think the fullbacks spring to mind first and foremost. I think people like Wesley Fofana, who's obviously had a difficult and injury-interrupted first season, is a player I think will really develop. But it might be even some of the real youngsters, players like Carney Chukwuemeka, for example, who's hugely talented and was kind of the leader of the successful England youth winning team last summer, has gone to play for them again now. It might even be someone like him is a real surprise next year and plays regularly. Because if he buys into the ethos, Pochettino will pick that above the name.
Amazing. I think a lot of Chelsea players or Chelsea fans are like surprised maybe a little bit at the treatment of Chukwuemeka, specifically that we held him back a bit from even joining like the under-20s World Cup and then or Youth Cup, and then he hasn't been playing week in week out. And we have a lot of young talent. Also springs to mind like Madueke, who I thought was really good in the last couple of games in a Chelsea side that were quite poor, for lack of a better word, and Mykhailo Mudryk as well. I'm super excited to see maybe what Poch can do with him. Were there any drawbacks to having Poch as a coach? Because it sounds all super positive, and eventually things did break down. So, what do you think kind of happened at Spurs, and should Chelsea fans be wary of anything?
I think there was a huge mental fatigue after the Champions League final, but
Mm,
truth be said, the rut had actually set in before that, and the Champions League run masked the fact that Tottenham had been really bad in Pochettino's last 9 months, certainly based on the standards that had been set in the previous few years. I mean, it was the last 9 months of his Tottenham career, we only won 2 away games, and remarkably, those were at Dortmund and Ajax, which makes no sense. We didn't win a domestic away game from mid-January to the moment that he was sacked. And the big thing that he failed to do really was adapt once Moussa Dembele couldn't run anymore, because
mhm,
Moussa was a hugely controlling and positive influence. I always think when I've watched Chelsea for the last couple of years, you always look much better when Mateo Kovacic plays well, because he's got
mhm,
the energy both on and off the ball to dictate the game. And I think he's had a dip recently. And I think that would be really important to get that position right. When Dembele obviously couldn't play to the required standard anymore, Tottenham became more of a counter-attacking team that relied much more
mhm,
on Son's pace in behind. And we went from being a team that could go to an Anfield or an Emirates and control the ball, that had to rely very much on these key, brilliant attacking players at the
mhm,
top end. When it lost control, began to lose a little bit of discipline. It was also after the final, the book, and whenever anyone releases a book, that's a big problem. And I think a lot of the players began to start questioning their manager at that stage. And I think they also, it sounds strange, but they got a bit bored. They'd got to
mhm.
the point where they'd had the same voice for 5 years and needed a fresh one. And I'm sure if you went back to ask all of those players now, they'd probably go, we didn't actually need that fresh voice, because they got no better without him. But he struggled. That would be my real concern, that when he lost the control in players and the physicality in the middle of the pitch, not just Dembele, but also Victor Wanyama as well,
Mhm.
then he struggled. He struggled to replace that. And when he invested in people like Tanguy and Ndombele, it didn't work.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, do you think that that could in part be down to Spurs recruitment and just like a lack of squad depth, for example?
Well, Tottenham had a problem where the squad was quite stale, because of the stadium work, didn't spend any money for 2 years, although
Yeah.
it's widely believed that Pochettino actually turned down a lot of signings because he will very much vet a person's personality as much as their football ability. And if he
Mhm.
just doesn't think it works, or they're not right for the environment and the team ethic, then he won't go with them. Said once they lost control and he went and spent, when they did heavily spend, the players didn't work. And you could say Ndombele needed more time to settle in. Absolutely
Mhm.
true. But actually, we've gone forward nearly 4 years now, and Ndombele's still not settled as a Tottenham player, and obviously been out on loan. Other players he invested in, like Giovanni Lo Celso, didn't particularly work. He
Yeah.
sold Kieran Trippier, and which was a mistake. Trippier
Yeah.
actually didn't have a great 18-19 season, but he sold him and didn't replace him. And the player
Mhm.
that he wanted to play there was Juan Foyt, who got injured in pre-season. Then he was stuck with Cole Walker-Peters, who wasn't quite ready, and ended up reverting back to Serge Aurier. So he made a mess of that situation. And I think
Yeah.
it was things like that. Some of the players internally began to question some of his own ideas and methods from that stage.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's going to be super important to kind of get like a core group of players from the beginning, which is something that Chelsea have struggled with. And I personally think that we're going to see a decent amount of outgoings if we can sell
Yeah,
them.
it's needed. It's worth remembering when it obviously began to kind of unravel a little bit at Tottenham, and all Tottenham fans wished that they'd stuck with him and got rid of the players in hindsight. But it was over 4 years into the tenure that things began to go wrong. And from the start, there was only an upward curve. The only warning I'd say, and I've spoken to a few Chelsea fans about this, is In the first 3 months or so, you couldn't see any philosophy or anything different.
Okay.
It really took a long time to come through, and that Tottenham team was on the floor and really kind of devoid of identity, a little bit like what Chelsea have been in the last few months as well. So I think it will take a time, and as I said, it will need to have a look at all the players, and once he starts culling the people out who don't buy in, then I think you'll see the uplift. I wouldn't be surprised if a few months in you're going, I'm not sure about this,
Hmm.
but it will need some time. If you've got 12 months in and you're going, I'm still not sure about this, then it's not working.
And do you think that him not being associated with the past season at all and starting fresh July 1st, having a totally new preseason
Yeah.
might help with that? It might give the team a little bit of a head
I
start to
think
buy into the identity.
it'll re-energize the fan base as well, because the
Yeah.
fan base knew that once you'd lost to Real Madrid, there was nothing to play for. It's just get the season finished. We want to move on to the next one. So he comes in fresh. I think that the players have an understanding, right? July the 1st, that's when he's taking over, and start fresh from now.
And we spoke a little bit about this, like behind the scenes, but how do you rate this appointment for Chelsea? Like, I know, like, you can't predict the future, of course, but how do you see it working out?
I think it probably depends what Chelsea fans want at the moment. The ones I've spoken to have very much said that they understood the Potter appointment originally and the idea of going for this kind of project manager and taking a little bit of time. If Chelsea fans are looking for someone that's going to come in and they're going to challenge for the league next year, I think it's probably a little bit unlikely. But that is possible from year two, I think. I think top four might even be quite difficult in the first year because, as I said, I think it will take a while for his methods to come through and be implemented. But if Chelsea fans are happy to be a bit more patient about this one, then there's no reason to believe that it won't be successful. But we're also in a different era now where Chelsea as a club has obviously become very accustomed to winning things every year.
No.
And as Arsenal have found out this year, overhauling Manchester City is not easy and is not going to get any easier while Pep Guardiola's there. So to hit the right top level of be winning a Premier League and a Champions League again, very unpredictable. But I think very importantly, at Chelsea, if Chelsea fans are happy to be patient, they will they'll get a team that they can be proud of again. That's a definite.
Yeah, I think like that's what, at least that's what I want. I can't speak for all Chelsea fans, but I just want to see some improvement and some consistency. And like you said, fighting for Man City for the title is going to be difficult for basically any team, but just to be like up there again, because since we last won the league, we haven't even been close to challenging for it. So it's nice to see that hopefully Poch will bring some stability, and I don't expect like overnight success. A lot of people are saying, oh, the last time that Chelsea didn't qualify for Europe, they won the Premier League. Like, I don't think that we're in nearly the same
No,
situation or parallel. But hopefully we can get back to a better place. That's all I have. Those are all my questions. Thank you so much for
pleasure.
joining me and giving us such brilliant and pointed insight about Poch. And you've certainly made me way even more excited than I was, if that's even possible, about this appointment. It just feels like it's the right place, right time. So I've got fingers crossed. Let everybody know where they can find you.
You can follow me at Planet FPL podcast. We cover a lot of fantasy Premier League, but also do a lot of non FPL related topics. We certainly I speak about Pochettino a lot as obviously a Tottenham fan. I go regularly to Tottenham, so yeah, Planet FPL is where you can find me and my pod partner Suj, who for his troubles is a West Ham fan.
To even maybe even tougher season for them than
Yeah,
Chelsea.
well, unlike us, he's got a final to look forward to at least. So
That's true. Yeah. What am I saying? Yeah, totally true. Well, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Guys, definitely make sure to follow James and listen to the Planet FPL pod. I know I'll definitely be checking out for FPL tips since my season was not as good as I
oh,
would have.
I didn't say we cover FPL. I didn't say we were good at FPL.
That's how I feel. Like, I just do it for fun and put the show out on my channel. If you guys like this video, make sure to drop a like, comment what you guys think about the Poch appointment, and sub to the channel while you're at it. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, evening, whatever time you're watching this. And until next time, I'm out. Bye.